Hello and welcome to another episode of Gifting GiG-06. Today we are looking at this PR, which I already checked out locally, and it's about changing the discovery options for Git repositories to, well, pull more information from the environment. And there's a bunch of requirements and restrictions about this, and I didn't really take a look at how this is implemented yet, but I thought we can do this together. So that's a very authentic look at my very initial thoughts, unfiltered. So let's first take a quick look at the files changed. It's just in one commit here. That should, yeah, it's not really easier or less easy with more commits, but that definitely makes it easy. And the changes are across Git Discover, a plumbing crate, and Git repository, the top level crate that application developers would use. And yeah, since lib is changed here, I think this was mentioned in the PR. There's some additional helpers here that deal with environment overrides, and let's see if I can make sense of this real quick. So this is interesting because the git dir is explicitly checked, and that's usually something that is relevant for hooks, as far as I know, or as far as I think I know. There's a lot to know about how Git detects its repository. And I thought I had done something in that direction already. At least I had an idea where that should go. I never had the idea of adding more discovery helpers here. And it could potentially be okay to have these, but I thought there are better ways that are going through options, because ultimately environment is boiled down into options, and options are then the source of truth for everything, so that you don't have to worry about your environment so much. So this stuff usually doesn't pick up or deal with environment variables implicitly, and this one does. And that's a warning sign that it goes against what I had originally in mind, which is changeable. But the reason is this is still a library, and we want to be very mindful about when we read environment variables and provide a lot of control about that as well. And make it explicit for sure. Here it's not explicit because it also doesn't mention this in the docs. And even then, I mean, environment overrides kind of says it does something with the environment, but I'm a bit on the fence about that. Okay, I think that's something to check out first. So let's go there. Git dir is here. Let's see if we can find that. I think I should have called it hooks somewhere. Yeah, I mentioned that a lot. Please make it easy to find this. Custom hooks here, maybe this one. Ah yeah. Open with environment overrides. Test with hooks, git current time for ref log and transaction, which I think is something specific to git hooks or particular to git hooks. So this was also used here, but I think the problem is that with that, you can't override the git dir, because options don't include kind of a git dir override, which I think at some point there was, but it was really odd. Oh, look at this, what's going on here? That's definitely something to fix real quick. So now I see why this would be there. I wonder where the git dir is even read from, right? Because it's not like, do we ever check this again and actually use the value? Yeah, so this is here. This is all protected by gitsec. And look here in open. Environment overrides from tests. Okay, so here we very explicitly say it's environment overrides, and we handle them. There's git-sec involved. And this is why that works, because environment overrides picks this up and passes this path that might be from the environment for use in discovery. Okay, so these truly are helpers only. And maybe how would that usually work? Where is this? This is thread safe repository open with environment overrides. Okay, yeah. Not entirely sure. This whole, this whole way of doing things is great, because I was always, now I had the intuition that this is something that is kind of passed as a parameter here. So that's not so implicit, but maybe it's the right way to do that. It's still kind of a tough topic. At least there's something very explicit here that appears to be used only internally, so still not entirely sure, but okay. This load env overrides. This is new, is it? The sealing directories. Git discovery across file system. Is this, did I write this, or is this? Ah, that's in git discover. So I don't think I wrote this, which makes it part of, yes, part of what we gotta review. Oh, so I guess I was muted for a while, but anyway. So long story short, 32 is the right value here. Now that I'm thinking about it, this standard, you know, it's an option here, but Git has it hard-coded. We could make it easy to use the right value because everybody now has to use this value, huh? So, ooh, that's dangerous here to do. Yeah, let's take this out. Allow missing docs, because that will totally not lead us to noticing that there need to be docs. I mean, I wouldn't search for this. I usually do it like that. Allow missing docs. And it's kind of sad that we didn't put the docs yet, because I think we can. But yeah, max symlinks. What happened here? So should we just turn this into real path ops, which takes additional information, and the standard real path just defaults this. And then it's probably time for commit, because that touches quite a bunch of files. Real path. Path, current working directory, and 32 as very magic number. That's a bit better. Okay. Are we still happy here? Real path. Interesting. Doesn't find it, because probably it has to be pulled up somewhere. Here. Real path ops. Good. That's better. And I think wherever we use real path ops, on the call side, we can now use the defaulted version. Unless it's in a test where we specifically test something, but we can see that easily, fortunately. Oh yeah, right. Should also change the function name here. Okay. 32, that's quite a depth, I must say, but if Git thinks it's all right, we can do the same for now, no problem. Okay, one more. Oh wait, right. So here, this is production code where it uses 8 for identity checks, and I think this is actually true. This is why I have the 8, so I didn't pull that out of my nose. I might have had a reason to call this 8. So that should be can be considered a factor owned by the user. Yeah, that's in the min-gw compat layer. And I think they might not even do that. Okay, so maybe I did pull it out of my nose. Yeah, so that canonicalization here is something we do, because I think we have to do that, whereas Git might have good reason not to have to do that. And that's that. Good. That's a lot of changes. But they're mainly about, yeah, they're actually all about the real path. That I just call it as a flyby change here. At real path opt place of, yeah, it's actually a breaking feature. Make real path easier to use by introducing real path opt. Okay, great, and that's the commit message. So back to where we were. Where were we? Somewhere here in upwards. And the should normalize special case where we use it if possible. What does Git do? Let's go back to setup. And it does it similarly. So it ignores errors. Yeah, that's a faithful implementation. That's super interesting here, right? This feature, you know, this only absolute paths are allowed, but you can have this. I mean, who knows that, right? This is just so very special. But anyway, it's, since we use it in the same context, it's something we want. I don't know if that should be public. Are we like, you know, I really tend to prefer a smaller footprint of public API, because then we don't have to support it. And this seems to be so very special. Can remain private for sure. I do like well-documented functions no matter what. Pass a byte string of colon separated path. I like this. Into a vector of, I can probably do it like this. Yeah, I mean, kind of into a vec. The rest is kind of obvious, maybe. No. Separate path into, yeah, we can all read this. No need to Englishify it. No absolute paths are discarded. Non-absolute paths are discarded. This makes, the thing is, for Git, it makes sense to do that because they need absolute path, and they can also, they only have absolute path when they are comparing path. But in our case, we don't absolutize ceiling deers, and we don't force any processing on it except for the bare minimum. So we don't have to act that way. I think let's run, you know, it's kind of special case. I don't think we need that actually. Oh. That's interesting. Okay, that's why it's public, huh? Because there's parse from env. And why does it need ceiling deers? It checks, it's essentially a test for, it's essentially a test for parse ceiling deers here. Or is it? Does it ever call anything else? No. So this is a test that we want elsewhere. Which is probably here. So this is specifically for parse ceiling deers. And that's from env. It's interesting. Oh yeah, it needs to have these paths so that canonicalization or real pathization can work. Okay. Is there something else? That's probably okay to do it like this, huh? Yeah, I guess. Okay, let's commit this. Okay, commit is done. And now for the question, should this even be like this? Let's quickly look at the diff, just to be sure existing code wasn't changed to make this kind of behavior necessary. It's mainly about ceiling tiers and adjustments to deal with the change in type. So no other adjustments were made, but that's great because this means my assumptions about it are still correct. Let's validate. Yeah, parse ceiling tiers. That's also something that is used in there only, but we want to test it, so we have to leave it outside. That's fine. Now, for the function itself, ceiling tiers, find ceiling tier height. So that absolutizes the ceiling tier because the absolutize is something we also do unconditionally on the directory itself, the one we are using. And then all right, I already merged something that I want to merge back now. That changes the outlook of this code a little bit. And I think now that I see this, last time I just looked at the diff, I think this can be different. Because why make a test down here that kind of overrides what we made up here? This should be just one. And I think it's all about, did we make something absolute or not? And the test here, after rewriting it, is still wrong. Because we always get the current working directory. And what if this absolutize never did anything? But instead, just coincidentally, these are including each other. And we don't know. So if we, basically this part can go here. And then it's more clear how we should respond. Then all the pieces will be correct that use this flag. So, oh, what happened? So this logic should be here. Made absolute, this means it was not absolute before. And we actually made it absolute, which is entirely optional here in absolutize. This will only happen as needed. And that's more like the logic that we need. What's castaway? It's probably some dependency that came in. With an upgrade to compact string, I presume, because that's the only place where this should happen. Okay, so that's a decent refactor. And that might be a half decent commit message. Okay, tests still work. And now back to the actual question, like what should parse ceiling tiers do? Because I think it doesn't have to, this is a good thing, and we don't do it that way. We can have ceiling tiers that are not absolute and we don't enforce it. And that's really something the caller does. The caller has to ensure. But then again, I don't like the silent dropping of ceiling deers that are not absolute. So maybe we can just, yeah, it's tough. I think Git in some way is right, because we can't really tell if something is absolute or if something is the same path if you have a relative path. So then a ceiling deer might not actually be the right ceiling deer. So dropping this, technically it's the right thing. We can have auto-normalization, which is a feature that you would want then. So then the question is, will these ceiling deers match? And we have something here that match ceiling deer or error. So we need at least one ceiling deer to match, or this will be a hard error. So I think that's enough of a safety for people to configure their ceiling deers so that they make sense for what they do. But this also means that in order to match a ceiling deer, you really have to do that right when you find the ceiling deer height. And that only works in conjunction with, well, the right path, because it's how many times you can pop a path component off the end. So we can't just temporarily absolutize stuff here. So yeah, so here we basically allow, or do we? So if it's not, what does this do? It doesn't have it's not an expression. Wait, I think I'm not reading this code right now. I feel there should be a semicolon here, and I'm a bit surprised there is none. Because then there's some side effects here, but why is there no semicolon? Yeah, let's just put one. If it's so strange to look at this, let's put a semicolon. And we did, and it's still the same. Okay, so if the search deer is absolute and the ceiling deer as relative and the ceiling deer is absolute, then yeah, so this code is about aligning them. If one is absolute, the other is relative, we try to kind of normalize them. So if our ceiling deer is not absolute, we will, while the search deer is, we will make it absolute by just joining the current working directory. But that ultimately, I mean, it's as good as we can go, and the caller just has to make it so that these can match. That's the point. However, this might not work correctly. I mean, we always use absolutize, so we don't have any relative path components in there. But this might, yeah, I think this works actually. This should work well enough. Even though if this search deer is not absolute, then we turn it as relative, then we turn absolute ceiling deer is relative by stripping the current working directory. So also that will work. So it's not too bad actually. Back to the original question, do we have to do it like this? Where's my parse function here? Do we have to implement this, which normalizes them as a special feature if you have an empty path in there, but otherwise it removes relative path, and the relative, that's not allowed here at all, but that's okay, I guess, because we will turn it relative as needed for comparison's sake. So yes, I think, long story short, this can stay like this. Because the way we calculate the max height is still valid, but this also means that relative ceiling deers, oh no, we reject them here, so no, This means relative sealing deals can't be passed through the environment, but they can still be passed directly. And the caller has to make sure this makes sense. Okay. I never really looked at this test, so maybe I should. Now I see. This is clever. We have a relative path here, then we have an empty one, and this is how the symlink string once gets normalized and once doesn't. I see. Very clever. Let me call parse, and then there's some assertions. Relative path are discarded, so we only have 2. And this is exactly, I think that's a good thing that I looked at this again, huh? Because for that we have the third argument. I really avoid comments in code where I can. Symlinks are not resolved after empty item. Yeah, makes sense. Cool. And yeah, these comments, fine. It's kind of typical, prepare, run, and run the thing, and then assertions, or however that was called. There was a nicer way of saying this. Fine. And only on Unix we run that. Also fine. Okay, so I guess we have it. One last question here is the sealing dears. This was previously a slice of path buffs, and now it has to be contained here in order to work with this. Because now load env overrides would have to, need some storage for the path. And I always envision it, to not be freestanding. I mean, for me, it's all right if that storage comes from the outside, which allows, why is that? Because now people have to pass ownership. They have to clone. Every time they want to discover something, they have to clone this, right? And that's not so nice. And people can call discovery maybe many times. This is why I thought maybe it's good if they don't have to clone this. Maybe I'm overthinking it, because who really cares about a bunch of seeding deals which are optional and, gets rid of a lifetime. So I think, yeah, let's keep it simple. Let's just keep it simple. Despite me having had different plans, I think that's over-optimization. Sorry for jumping around. I actually thought I could easily get back to where I was here, where load env overrides is used in Git repository. Okay. Now, do we want discover with environment overrides? And why did I think that would look differently? So I thought that would look differently. It's basically here. And this load env overrides, right, that's the options, that's upwards options, okay. So that mutates what's there and overrides what's there. We have a similar mechanism elsewhere, but we call it differently. Apply environment. We call it here. I think we have something similar in the options, in the open options, I thought. So where is that happening? I think all that here, it's called from env. Maybe. Open with environment overrides. This is in thread save repository. Now we are back to this thing where I was thinking, oh, I probably thought something very valid when I implemented this, but now I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, this environment overrides, look, I think there's something to be to be checked here. There's something fishy here, and it's because of this. Like these environment overrides, they include a git dir. And that is coming from the git dir. And even though this thing is ultimately called, if git dir is in the environment, you have to check it first. And this is something I don't get, I guess. That once we do this, otherwise we load env overrides and discover directly. But maybe that's the right way to do it. Maybe this has to be done like this because we don't want to discover if the git dir is set, yeah? So maybe that's exactly it. Reads git dir if it is set, or runs a git dir if it is set. If that fails, discover upwards from. If unset, and let's be very specific here. Discover upwards from directory until one is found while applying options with overrides from the environment. Okay, so gitsec is ignored for this, which probably is okay because you basically say, I want the environment to matter. How about gitsec here? Here we do it in the same way. We have from env. We do gitsec checks, which kind of is ridiculous since we always allow. All right, so I think this is the part where it's kind of fishy because we don't have to do this check. But that's, I guess, maybe it's an exercise for me to validate. We do get into the habit of checking whether we are allowed to read certain environment variables or not. And since we are dealing with discovery options here, these options are only really important for for when we run the discovery. Then these env overrides. What about the name of the function? We have from env, we have apply environment. Here, this mutate self. This one mutate self. And from env, why is there more here from env? Yeah, okay, unrelated. And we have from env, which actually instantiates a new one because it's really environment overrides only that we have here. I wonder why I went through the trouble of doing this since it's all that's just a little helper structure, I guess. But the gitsec integration is useless because we totally ignore it. For this, we can't really have it because we first need to read it so that we know trust levels, and with trust levels we can check the options, and only in the options we can check permissions. So it's a chicken egg problem here. This is why. And yeah, I think it's time to acknowledge this. I can keep this utility. There don't need to be tests for this particular function, but I think there should be tests for that, and that's already marked. Okay. So now git prefix. You can just remove that check. And that's a basic refactor to make that a bit less confusing next time I look at this. And now we know, okay, if somebody calls this, environment variables will be red, the standard Git environment variables, and there's no way you can configure this additionally. Load env overrides, I think we should call this apply environment. And now Git Boolean, what's this? Where's that from? That's, ooh. That's why, yeah, that was one more question that now has been answered. We definitely don't want to have git config here. This means, that's a great thing. This means we actually don't want to have apply environment here. At least not for git discovery across file systems. So this has to be on the calling side then of git repository. Because this huge git config crate, you know, this is something that I consider exclusive to git environment. And just to get this type, nah. Okay, but we have a bunch of refactors loaded up here. Let's see if that still compiles. I should also not forget to compile git repository, because that changed quite a bit, but looks like we are lucky today. Okay, everything builds. Let's call this a refactor. More, so this is, yeah, let's just do this offline. All right, and that's the commit message. And now for the last one here. So definitely don't want to have git discovery across file system. I very much presume that this is getting a git env bool. So yes, we would have to support everything, but we can't, like all this stuff. It's something that you could copy paste if you really wanted to. But then, you know, it's kind of tech debt that might or might not have to be repaid depending on how stable the git config file format is, which I think is pretty stable. But then you have to adapt it. Oh, look at that. That's even an owned value. You know, actually, I'm happy. I'm kind of happy to, just because this has to own the value. Or does it? No, it doesn't have to. It's a cow. It's always a cow, but it's so, oh, it's so complicated. So no off false 0 or empty. That is false, and otherwise we check for true. And that's interesting. This implicit value, we've seen that. So where has this been used? Show me. I thought it was somewhere in the tests. Is this set somewhere? No. Okay, maybe I made that up for myself. Yeah, so it's a bunch of comparisons, you know, and it's a typical problem. This might mean that we might want to split up the parsing of, or might want to split the git crate a bit more, the git config crate, because it's huge, like 9,000 lines of code, just to get this Boolean parsing, you know. We could split it up into git config values potentially, and then that kind of thing will be a non-issue. Potentially. It's also a big thing just for that. So maybe since the first occurrence, let's just wait. Or yeah, what's the options? Split this out, split good config boolean out into a smaller crate along with maybe parsing for other types. Doing this is not so clear cut. So I definitely don't want to do it for this. And we can move this up to Git repository, which might be confusing. That sealing directories is red, but discovery across file system is not. But it would allow us to not have to copy paste code that we otherwise will have to copy paste. And I don't want to write all the tests for that. I'm happy to just copy. But you would have to, right? If you want to be doing things properly, you would have to do that. So the only way to do this properly is to use the git config crate, which means we really have to put this on top. Is there some other Git discovery? Oh. Ones here? No, it's just this Git discovery environment variable. Okay. Yeah. Decision. Put it on top. I mean, why not? Oh. This can always happen. So here we are in setup. Git env. Look, they do have nice git env bool. Do they have similar ones? Git env ulong. Now we are getting somewhere. So this will happen again. Git env bool, git env ulong. So integer parsing, and that includes also quite some logic. So I think to do this right, we really, and to allow future plumbing crates to do the same. Yeah, how often is this used? Let's also check that. That's a good thing. Git config no system. And that looks like it's used like this in git config, so that can have access to this. Then we have git test commit graph, git test. That's test stuff, also doesn't matter. Test, doesn't matter. Hey. I did not close this. Take your time. Take your time. Hey. How slow can this be? Strange, not found more, did it? Test. Git adder no system. But that's something that's definitely configured from Git repository. Git force untrack cache. So that's also something to be configured from the top. You know, maybe that tells us that we just want to configure these environment thingies from the top and not from the bottom. Even though I do like to have the sealing deal special casing implemented here. Yeah. What about the ulong? Yeah, but I tend to put it to Git repository, really. Even though it means that these plumbing crates can't own their own stuff. Progress, definitely top level. Test stuff. mmap limit, that's interesting. Could be in Git ODB, but we also don't have that support at all. We just map everything, so not important. HTTP backend, doesn't matter. Yeah, okay, so I conclude it doesn't matter enough to do that, to put it into its own crate, that parsing. Which means it has to get out of here. And go up to where it's used. Apply environment. And then we apply additional environment. Okay, that is upwards options. Let's keep this. Can I still paste this here? Yes, I can. Upwards options. Okay, this should be mutable. Now we have git config value. Values boolean try from. The get config bytes we can easily emulate this, right? I think that is what I think that's an option anyway. Yep. So we do like from arrest string. Let's check again what this actually does. Forgot from OS string. No, it does that. Yeah, it's called v for value. Yeah, we do have path, like in git path, we do have methods for that, but yeah, here we just clone what's there. That's fine. Hey, can you please import something here? No, it does not. I don't know what the issue is. Let's import try from. And now definitely clean up imports. So that doesn't layer so very well here, huh? And that's okay, but you know, usually you do these things in line. So let's do it like this. And then we can just layer this entirely. Why not reassign it? That's okay. Apply environment, apply additional environment. And now that's opts. Okay, where did it auto import things? Oh, come on, show me. Here. Try from. This we don't need. That goes down there where it's used. And this is only, I mean, that's a tiny module, so we can probably just leave this here, even though it's only used in there. Following my own rules, I keep dependencies tightly together. And then this is that. Okay. Now we can clean this out. Git config, be removed. This can be removed. Try from. Can probably also be removed. Yeah. Yeah. Try from can be removed. Okay, that ran. Change of documentation Let's not note that is not red. As it requires parsing of git config style boolean values. For that, see the respective functions in, yeah, I don't know, let's not refer to users of this even though they are part of the same family. Okay. Huh? Right, let's make this build. Did it catch up by now? It did. Nice. Now we have to put it down here. Good. Now, nope, it does not compile. Why is that? From option vec is not implemented. What? Ah, yeah, right. That should be an and then. And now that I see this, this is something we want to do for this one as well. It has get and bytes. I think this is now easier to just inline. Okay, everything builds. And that's the second refactor. So let's look at this one more time. Yeah. Git dir, which includes and this one as well. Hey. Like this. Good. So if unset discover, yeah, the trust map is always used. So once we finally know what we want, we will use the trust map on that path. So that's correct. Then finally use the trust map to determine which of our own repository options to use based on the trust level of the effective repository directory. Okay, so that could be it. Let's commit this. Okay, now finally let's run Clippy. And if that is happy, I think this can even be merged. Because yeah, that's it. We have apply environment. Also this, yeah, let's think about this for a moment, because I really didn't do it so much except for saying I had other ideas, but ultimately it called this open with environment overrides. And this includes git dir. Yeah, so it's a nice thing to have, is open with environment overrides. So if git dir is set, it's just this. I don't think there's anything we can do. But the file system, yeah, the discovery across file system, same thing. We have to do that here. That's the only place where this ever happens. And then you can open a repository very much like Git does, and that's the plan, that's the idea, and it's very explicit about, yeah, we use environment variables, and you gotta be careful about this potentially. But if you don't, there's lots of other options. So yeah, that looks cool. That's the way. So let's merge this and see if we can get this through our local testing. And yeah, I think that's it for today's episode. So David seems to be, or not seems to be, is doing a great job. And even though sometimes I'm initially on the fence about things, the more time you spend with it, the more you can realize that it's actually great. Greetings to Berlin as well. So I think it's more like David Knack. Please keep the great submissions coming. And now it's clear why. So he's the author of Starship. So yeah, I wasn't really aware, but you know, now it makes me even happier that these changes help to make this work for Starship. This is why I think he's pushing so much for doing it the Git way, because then you can really get the same results, and that's awesome. So yeah, this looks good too. Then let's call this a day and say thanks for watching and have a good day.